We're going to make a really easy stroganoff with just a few ingredients. I've been on a soft food diet for 2.5 years. I'm going to start by making beans in my Instant Pot. I'm going to use a 1/2 cup of white beans. I feel like white beans have a very mild bean flavor, so they won't overpower the stroganoff. And after we measure out a 1/2 cup of dry beans, we'll make about 1.5 cups of cooked beans. That's a loose estimate. I mean, tiny beans will make less and larger beans will make more, etc. You want to look through your beans and make sure there are no rocks in them, and you also want to take out any beans that are discolored or broken. You'll need 1.5 cups of liquid. I'm going to use chicken stock. And I don't go by exact measurements. I just make sure the beans are covered by about 1 inch of liquid, and then I pour off the extra liquid, and then I don't have to worry if I maybe didn't put quite enough water in and some of the beans didn't get cooked all the way. I want to make sure the beans are really soft because I need them to be soft on a soft food diet. On a soft food diet, I don't cook things to be al dente. I cook things to death. And that's the way I can make sure that they're soft enough. And I have no worries. We're going to cook these in the Instant Pot on the pressure cook setting for 45 minutes. The stroganoff is going to use beef stock, so if you want to cook the beans in beef stock to keep the flavor the same throughout, that would be a good idea too. We're going to make a really easy stroganoff with just a few ingredients. You'll need mushrooms. I'm using 4 large mushrooms, an onion, 3 cloves of garlic, beef stock, or if you don't have beef stock, you can use 1 beef bouillon cube and however much water you're supposed to put with that, a can of cream of mushroom with roasted garlic, and Worcestershire sauce, and finally, tofu. I'm using tofu instead of cream cheese to make it creamy. Tofu has good protein in it, and that's why I'm using it instead of cream cheese. Once the beans are done cooking, I'm going to drain the excess water off. And I'm going to set the beans to the side. I'm making this as a slow cooker recipe, so it's 3:51 now, and I'll eat at probably 6:30. I'm using the Instant Pot. It has a saute function, which I'm going to use, and it also has a slow cooker function. So I'm just doing all of the cooking. The Instant Pot liner is the only thing I'll be getting dirty today. You can buy mushrooms from the store that are already pre-cut. I'm cutting my own mushrooms because since I'm on a soft food diet, I cut them a lot smaller than regular slices. But first I'm going to chop up the onion. I try and make each piece of onion about less than 1/4 inch, closer to 1 millimeter squared for each piece of onion. First I cut the onion longways. First I cut it in half, obviously, from the end that has the little hairs on it, which are the roots, to the end that the top of the onion was growing out of. Then I cut millimeter thick lines down the onion, and then I cut millimeter thick lines in the opposite direction. And this is going to be, this is a crock pot recipe that I am adapting to be a soft food recipe. If you weren't on a soft food diet and you were eating meat, stew meat is the type of meat that are generally used in a lot of crock pot recipes because it's kind of a tougher piece of meat, but when you cook it a long time, it gets easier to eat. But what you can do instead is take like a whole piece of, a solid piece of meat, something that's not already cut into pieces. Cook that with all of this, and then the people who aren't on a soft food diet can cut up those pieces of meat for their serving, and the people who are on a soft food diet would still have the stroganoff sauce to eat with their beans. Alright, they're a little bigger. They're between 1 millimeter and 1/4 of an inch. So I guess it's probably good that I went for 1 millimeter and I ended up with less than 1/4 of an inch. And they are going to get smaller as they cook and all the water cooks out. As soon as I finish chopping up the onion, I'm going to start sauteing it in the Instant Pot. And if you feel like the pieces are too big for you to be comfortable with, you can just take your knife and run them through quite a few more times until the pieces are the size that you feel comfortable with. A tablespoon of butter or oil. I'm sauteing on low. I'm gonna do it for 10 at the most. I'm gonna add a big pinch of salt to the onions that are cooking to draw the water out of them, and that helps them cook, so it's gonna be about 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Make sure to stir the onions around in the oil, and that also helps them cook. Next is the mushrooms. These are really large mushrooms. I mean, that's the palm of my hand, and the mushroom almost covers the entire thing. So I'm going to cut it in half, then put the flat part on the cutting board, and then I cut across 1/2 of the mushroom. I cut it into thirds or fourths, and then cut it into slices. The slices are still tall, but they're a lot smaller than the slices you would get if you bought them pre-sliced at the store. If you buy them pre-sliced at the store, it saves a lot of time, and just run your knife through them quite a few more times and they'll get smaller. I'm using 4 large mushrooms and a medium one. If you want to save even more time, you can buy jarred mushrooms. They come in just like water. And you can buy a jar of those. They're already going to be very, very soft. If you want to, you could cut those up, or you could just drain the water from the jar and put that jar of mushrooms into the stroganoff. That's the absolute fastest way to do it. And now that I'm thinking about it, to make it a little less generic, I'm going to add some spices too. Probably thyme or rosemary or both. And that'll add some more flavor to it. Because when I started eating a soft food diet, I knew I wasn't going to be able to eat as many foods as I wanted, so I wanted to try and make them taste as good as possible. Although this is a time-saving recipe, so that's the other half of life. And what I've done too is sometimes I've cut all the mushrooms up the night before and then put them in the beef stock, like put them in a bowl, put the mushrooms in there, pour the beef stock over it. And then the next morning all I have to do is pour all of that into the slow cooker and go. After a couple mushrooms, go check on your onions, and I'm going to add the mushrooms in to cook with the onions. And I am going to be adding 1/4 cup of wine into the stroganoff. I should have added that as an ingredient too, sorry. If you don't cook with wine, that's fine. You can just use the broth instead, the beef stock. I just think it adds another flavor, and the alcohol cooks off, so you don't have to worry about that. Mushrooms cook down to be a much smaller size. They give off a lot of their moisture when they're cooking, and that makes the pieces a lot smaller than the ones that you're cutting right now. I'm going to add another 1/2 teaspoon of salt to help the mushrooms cook. And while the mushrooms cook, I'll start cutting up the garlic. The garlic is going to be cut into the smallest pieces, and smaller things cook faster So you add the garlic in at the very end, after everything else is already cooked. And I'm also going to add the herbs in when I add the garlic. It's summer right now, so I'm going to use fresh herbs because I have them, and we're supposed to get snow in May. It's crazy. So I'm going to use the herbs before I maybe accidentally kill them. And the garlic I'm just mincing, which basically means cut it into the smallest pieces you can. As you can see, in just a couple minutes, the mushrooms are cooked down to almost the size of the onions. I'm going to add in the mushrooms that I had put in beef broth. I'll let those mushrooms cook for a couple minutes and then I'll add in the garlic and thyme. If you were using dried spices, you would add a teaspoon of dried spices. If you're using fresh spices, you multiply that by 3, so you'll be using a tablespoon of fresh spices. I'm using thyme, rosemary, and a little bit of sage. The easiest way to do it is to pinch the top of the stem and then just, these are still new. Run your fingers down the stem and that pulls all the leaves off. And then the only parts that you have to kind of fiddle with are the tops, which is a lot less space than the rest of it. And then I'm just going to run my knife through the tiny leaves. Kind of release some of the oils and the spices. And you pull rosemary off the stem the same way. You hold it near the top and then run your finger down and pull all the leaves off. If we do get snow, I may cry because I really want to put the garden out. But these are kind of winter spices, and stroganoff's kind of a wintry food, so maybe it's all coming together for a reason. All right, I'm gonna go add all this in with the mushrooms that are cooking. I'm gonna mix it in a couple times, basically just enough so that you can start to smell the garlic. And then once that happens, I'm gonna add the rest of the ingredients. A can of cream of mushroom. And then I'm gonna fill up the can of soup with beef stock. It's a little over a cup. And a 1/4 cup of red wine. And then mix everything together. And also a 1/2 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. I'm going to take 1/2 block of tofu and put it in the blender. This is extra firm tofu. It's got 10 grams of protein and there's 5 servings in here. So that's a lot of protein that I'm adding into the stroganoff. Open the tofu over the sink because it's preserved in water. So as soon as you cut the opening off the package, the water can spill. 1/2 block of tofu into a blender. Okay, I could have used some of the beef stock to help loosen up the tofu. I think I'm gonna go grab some liquid out of the crock pot and try again. Tofu's gonna add protein, but it won't add the tanginess that cream cheese does. So if you still want to add like 1/2 block of cream cheese to get the tangy flavor, that would work too. Because I'm adding this for protein and creaminess. I'm going to cook it on high for 2 hours. Cooking the beans in with everything else because I'm afraid they'll break down too much and there won't be bean pieces. It'll just be like fragments of beans all throughout it. I'm going to add in the beans. Mix it together and then everything's ready. That's not entirely true. If you want to have this over pasta, you can start cooking the pasta now. You can get pasta made from chickpeas, and that's another way to add protein. Normally, I don't think about protein as much as I do when I'm on a soft food diet. It's a lot harder for me to get protein on a soft food diet than it is when I'm eating regular food. Same with vegetables. It's hard to get as many vegetables as I normally eat when I'm on a soft food diet compared to a regular food diet. Next time, I don't think I'm going to add the tofu. Tofu tastes like nothing, and I added half a block of nothing in with something that had good flavors. So it ended up tasting almost like the tofu blanketed the flavor and dulled it a little bit.